Hollywood, world, and so maybe that has a lot. I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. I don't have access to a lot of that, but I've often said that literally this. I believe that, and it's not just one movie. It actually has enough information for a trilogy, or if anything, a streaming Netflix series or what have you. I mean, I guess that could be done too as far as that. But the story needs to be told, and it will. It's just a matter of time, finding the right people, right resources, et cetera, et cetera. But everyone who's read the book loves it, and it's one of those books that once you start reading it, you literally can't put it down. It's 206 pages. And consequently, you can't. I mean, literally. I mean, you read that thing till it's done, and so it's a quick read. But part of the biggest, my biggest interest is, of course, directing it to actually take these various storylines, which the story, of course, I wrote it, and so I wrote both the book and the screenplay. So obviously, I probably have a better shot at getting something good. But in these 20-second time frames, there's stories upon stories upon stories. I mean, so it really for as far as like in a feature film world, it would probably take 3 films to really to tell it well, or at minimum a movie and a sequel. So, but we believe it's economically viable. And the statistics are just, you talk about people wanting to see this kind of thing. I mean, the actual numbers of wanting to see this. I mean, if you type in Giant Rock the movie, you'll on Google you'll get 189 million impressions. I mean, so I mean, and this is just organically. I've done some radio, but I really haven't had, I don't have a publicist, or I don't have any professional, as far as and stuff, but organically, I mean, people type in my name, Chad Meek, there's there can be anywhere from 3.5 to 15 million impressions out there. So, I mean, there's this organic interest of seeing this. So when people ask, well, who will see this movie? I said, well, they'll come.
Well, hey, Chad, I just want to say that I do have a couple movie producers and directors that listen to my show, along with a couple like Michael Caine, the actor, listens to my show quite often. And, things have changed in my show a lot. So maybe, somebody might get interested after we talk here, about making a movie or something. That would be awesome. Now, going into, if I vaguely remember, how did Howard Hughes, now was that your uncle or grandfather that at the gas station?
No, my uncle Howard Hughes get involved.
Yeah.
Howard Hughes. My uncle was he was a flight engineer, and he worked for Hughes. He actually worked for him, and he was Mr. Gadget. He was a self-taught engineer, but a brilliant man as far as mechanically, and so he was the go-to guy if there was any flaws in any of the used aircraft or any of that. So actually, especially during the war, he worked for him, and so Howard Hughes and they were actually friends. And so Howard Hughes he loved to take his planes out from Culver City, and he used to like to fly. He'd fly out the desert, and this is in the late 40s and 50s. There's a dry lake. Incidentally, there's an airport right next to the Giant Rock. It's a natural dry lake. It's a perfect landing strip. So Howard Hughes would come out there, and my aunt at the time, they actually had a small restaurant, and my aunt would make pies and things like that. So he would come out. I mean, he was so wealthy. He would come out. This is when he was in his more sane years, and this is after my uncle had left Hughes and he was out there. He'd come out, fly his plane, have a piece of pie, and then go home.
Wow.
And then my uncle actually constructed a thing that's still actually in existence, but no one's really can figure it out. It's called the Integratron, which is this white dome-like looking thing there that was originally created as a molecular cell rejuvenation machine and time machine. And actually, there's no metal in it. it's actually still out there. It's a huge tourist attraction. We family has had no. We don't have any affiliation with that, but it's still out there. A couple of women own it, and they charge some pretty good money to go and sit in. People had extraordinary experiences out in the middle of the desert at this dome, just sitting there. And but Howard Hughes actually gave some money to my uncle to help, help construct this thing and help develop it. And it never got to its main purpose. In fact, my father worked on it. My and the family, everyone worked on it. It was kind of a long project, but literally, if you go on the internet, you can see this Integratron. And actually, a lot of actually Anthony Bourdain, the late Anthony Bourdain, he went out and he did a whole thing out there. Jay Leno was out there. A lot of the Led Zeppelin was out there. A couple of bands, I think the Smashing Pumpkins actually recorded in the Integratron. Acoustically, it's just wonderful. I mean, it really is. I remember playing in the thing as a child. So as far as that, so I have some fond memories, but I haven't been in it in years. But
how big was it?
Go ahead. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. How big a dome is this?
Well, I mean, let me see. It's big enough to fit, have 100 people sit inside of it. So it's big. It's big. It's beautiful. It's beautiful too because literally it's just so out of place. You're out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and all of a sudden you see this white dome out there, and it's had a lot of interesting. It's had a change of ownership after my uncle died. Everything got sold and et cetera, went through several hands. But people now it's a tourist attraction. People from all over. I was filming a small documentary out there, and people from Austria, people from it's amazing as far as the kinship to this area from all over the world, where they go out both to see Giant Rock and to see the Integratron. So. This is all weird science, and my uncle did the very best he could. He was a pilot himself and a self-taught engineer, and really did okay, for himself. At one time, I think he had a newsletter that went out back in the day that I think had over 100,000 subscribers, and this is an amazing thing back in the day. To have that many, paid subscribers that would come out and do it. So we had a pretty large following with the whole UFO thing. So back during this time period, right after there was, of course, the Roswell thing, and then there was a couple other events that occurred, but it was all isolated. But this was the central focus, and literally every year, there would be a Giant Rock UFO space convention, and there would really be, at one time, there's as many as 12,000 people out there, out in the middle of the desert. So, and again, we're talking about circa 1950, 1960, and literally it was the only place in the world where people gathered, and they called them the Space Brothers and all kinds of stuff. I mean, some of the stuff it was a little, some of the stuff, if you're a UFO purist, it's a little hokey, kind of metaphysical and what have you, but it was extremely, the energy was just kinetic and just, it was amazing as far as, and really it was kind of like the precursor to this, Woodstock or, kind of the Woodstock type, or the peace movement. You had people out there who believed in UFOs, extraterrestrials, and were in contact with them or claimed they were. And majority of them were non-nuclear proliferation. So a lot of fascinating things, and really way, light years ahead of themselves. All of them were. And I've kind of taken them, and that's really the crux of the movie. I've kind of animated these people through a storyline, made them real and tangible people. And I think it's really something that of course I'm biased as hell, of course, on the whole thing, but I just think people will really enjoy this and enjoy their day-to-day, struggles and their the cat and mouse thing that went on with the FBI, and just trying to survive. And along with this, some extraordinary supernatural events in the super sensible world that literally are just completely unexplainable. I mean, they're just crazy. So, anyways, that's essentially it. And so I've kind of had my own hero's journey, trying to get this thing made. And boy, I tell you what, it's kind of like I've been involved in some pretty big business things here, and this is the business part about it. And this is even Orson Welles has said that, and a lot of people claim that they love the movie business. They just don't like the business part. But there's a bottom line too, and there's all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I'm the same camp. I don't, I think, yeah. So you always say, well, would I do this? So, well, yeah, I'd do it over again. So yeah, it's there.
Well, how's the book sales doing? I mean, since the last time we talked.
Yeah, I'll get book sales every month. It's funny. I'll get these small checks. As far as this, it sells. I think that at Amazon, I think the paperback version is like $12, and my cut is about $4. So I'll get these checks in my PayPal account, which I'm not. I'm listening. I'm grateful as far as that. But I'm always fascinated. Along with that, the amazing amount of emails I get, and some of the old timer connection I've managed to just by being out there. A lot of the people that were involved, some of the stories that never got in the book or never got in the screenplay. I mean, there's just some extraordinary, stories concerning things that I literally, like the Men in Black. I literally had actually a neurosurgeon contact me, and his father and George were working together with the Integratron and the Time Machine type thing, and they were working together, and so. Essentially, he claims that the Men in Black came to their house in Loma Linda and told his father, who was who was a physicist and taught at the university, various universities in Southern California, told him not to ever talk to George Van Tassel again, or they'd come and kill him and his family. And so, I'm listening to this firsthand from a neurosurgeon who witnessed this thing, and I'm thinking, I kind of believe this thing, and I've never had any, at least I've had kind of close encounters, or at least, with the Men in Black. I've had a couple of instances where it was really kind of strange, but I never put my hands around it. But some of the stories I've gathered from that, and some of the insight on what my uncle was going through from the old timers, and most of them are dead now, and by luck. A lot of the people associated. Now, my uncle died in 1978, and most all the people that were out there are dead. But I was able to get in touch with a lot of people, or they got in touch with me for some odd reason. So I was kind of the repository of what happened out there.
Interesting. Now, maybe I got, your story mixed up with somebody else's, but didn't somebody live in a cave or something at the... and then and then it got blown up, or it blew up, or
no. You've got some of it. There was a man named Frank. Originally, there was a man named Frank Kreitzer, and Frank Kreitzer was an interesting guy, and one of the unsung heroes of Giant Rock. And for some reason, and I was able to dig up a lot of information on him. And for some reason, my uncle never really. I don't know whether they were at odds or whatever. Or whatever, but Frank Kreitzer was this extraordinary guy that had wandered in to my uncle's gas station in the early 1930s, wanting for car repairs, and so and he had this vision about the giant stone, and that he was going to go out to this place and do mining and get a fortune in minerals and what have you. So. In fact, that's a part of the feature in both the book and the screenplay, where Frank Kreitzer tells, and Frank Kreitzer was about 10 years older than him. My Uncle George was working in a gas station with his uncle in Santa Monica as a mechanic. And so this guy comes in, and so the bottom line is that they end up giving him about $37 in cash, all the cash they had, a bunch of canned goods. and some tools and fixed his Exeter for free and sent him out the desert because he had promised them that they'd have a share of this mining fortune that Frank Kreitzer. So Kreitzer went out.